episode 2 of the Jeremy Alvarez TV podcast. And I'm super excited today. I have a very special guest, Juan Garcia, who is a mental health rehabilitation specialist. And he's going to talk to us about what he does and his job revolving around mental health. It's very important. And I'm just excited to be here and learn from you, man. That's what I'm most stoked about for this podcast episode.
Yeah, awesome, Jeremy. It's a pleasure to meet with you, dude. It always has been since I've kind of gotten to know you a little bit more over the years. But yeah, I'll dive a little bit into just like the introduction into the field. I just recently got a master's degree in sport and performance psychology. So we'll dive a little bit into what that entails. Dive a little bit into the current work that I'm doing as a rehab specialist. And then we can even, talk a little bit about what I want to pursue down the road in my future, and maybe give a few mental health tips that people can benefit from.
I think that sounds perfect, man. That sounds so great. So yeah, go ahead and start sharing with us now. How did it all get started? Where did you begin this journey?
Yeah. So it originally started with me playing sports, of course, just kind of growing up all my life and being around that. But I initially wanted to pursue a career as a guidance counselor, just kind of like a high school counselor. I really just wanted to be a mentor to young people, to youth. I got to play a little bit of junior college baseball, which was, great and a lot of fun. Had an incident occur where I had to sit down with my counselor at the school, and really sitting down with her guided me to the path that I'm on now, because getting a hint for just really like the love and how caring she was for her athletes and her students. Like, I wanted to be that role model, and I had that growing up, whether it be my parents and coaches, but a lot of people don't. So wanting to be an advocate for people that need mentors or a little bit of guidance is really where I got started. Until I learned that sports psychology was a field within itself. And as soon as I learned about that really just kind of got me going, fired me up. And here I am, just kind of, down that path. And again, just recently got a master's in sport and performance psychology, and eventually want to get a PhD in sports psychology. And, it's just kind of like where I am now and just kind of how I started. But yeah, I want to dive a little bit into the field and like the work of sport and performance psychology. And feel free to stop me at any time if you have questions, or, if you want to ask anything. But
I just want to say real quick before you get onto that, we actually met, I don't even know how many years ago it was now, but I was helping to teach PE to kids in Fresno at the Kappa facility. And they have, obviously it's like an indoor batting cage, but it's really nice. You can move the nets cages out of the way and do all kinds of activities on the turf. So that's what I was doing there. And so there's a lot of baseball players that would be coming in to hit, as soon as I was done. And one of the coaches there, Coach JB, our mutual friend, he's the one that connected us. Mm-hmm. And he talked all about you, how you were doing these amazing things with athletes and their minds and all that. And he, I had already been having conversations with him every day about how important the mind is and so on and so forth. Right. We're going to get into that. And he just mentioned you. He's like, you got to meet this guy. You got to meet this guy. So I think that's a good transition to what we're about to do, because, I was just hearing about like how you were specializing in athletes at the time, mental health, and specifically baseball players at that time. And now like you've grown into this whole thing where you've even gotten your master's now, and it all started from you with your own experience, right? With your counselor as well. So yeah, go ahead and start getting into the field. I want to hear about that next, but I just wanted to say kind of how we met and what I've heard about you. So tell me what, from that experience on, like how you've grown and what you've learned about the field.
Yeah. So initially I, specifically wanted to work with baseball, that being a sport I wanted to play, or played and, very much love. But now just kind of learning more about the field, like the general population, every day people just need guidance and direction, not just direction, but pointers to enhance their mental well-being. Now it's not just, hey, let me work with an athlete and try to enhance their performance. It's let me work with an athlete to enhance their overall well-being, And so really that's what the field entails. It's not just about getting bigger, stronger, and faster anymore. Are you mentally well? Is your cognition efficient and effective? Right? Like our mind and our brain drives our decision-making, the way we focus, our confidence, our motivation, and our behaviors, So if you're allowing the way you think to impact your behaviors and your decision-making, then that ultimately impacts your overall well-being, So one way I love to really dive into working with athletes is focusing on their overall well-being. I want them to enhance their physical well-being, their mental well-being, and their emotional well-being, because it's more of a holistic approach to enhancing the overall individual. It's not just let's get you bigger, faster, and stronger to be a better athlete. Well, if you enhance your mental and emotional well-being, like you're going to want to show up to practice and work hard.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking, because whether I like it or not in our field, or any healthcare professional in my field, when we're dealing with athletes, whether we like it or not, we're dealing with mental health, right? We're dealing with the mental side of it. Most of my job, I always say all the time, is, 99% coaching, right? I'm just trying to get the person to perceive what I need them to perceive, right? To achieve the physical goals of like what you're saying. But if 99% of it is get them to perceive that, and it's coaching in that way, then 99% of my job is probably, similar to that. Like it's more mental.
Mm-hmm.
So another thing we see in our field as far as physical is like, I say a lot, is that if an athlete is not healthy, then they're unable to have more hours and more time training and working on their craft. If they're injured, then they have to either be on the sidelines watching everybody else practice and train and get better, when those are precious hours and precious days that they could be out there doing this, especially if they're kids and they're developing, right? Important windows, right? You'll never get that back.
Mm-hmm.
Or B, they're playing hurt, right? And they're out there like can't give it their all, or their swing is a little, altered because they're trying to, compensate for the pain that they're having in their toe or their leg or whatever. Right. So, I think that's exactly what you're just saying too, is that on the flip side, the mental health side of it, you gotta be healthy and, on your game, and you have better words for that for me, I'm sure, but you got to be on your game as far as the mental side of it, so that you can have the capacity to be able to get out there and train and get the most out of your training. Right. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. I mean, burnout is inevitable. Like it's, people are going to burn out, whether it is because you're, pushing your physical body to extreme measures, or mental stress, and being super anxious about something. Like all this is going to play a role in undermining someone's performance. Ultimately we want athletes to partake in practices as much as possible, stay healthy physically and mentally. We want them to be bought in, present, not thinking about an injury, or thinking about something that their mind is consumed with, being worried about, how they're feeling because of a relationship that may not be going very well,
but can you give us give us an example of like what you're doing right now, and then give us an example of somebody, or maybe some situations where you've had to help somebody.
Yeah. So I mean, we can probably dive it a little bit into the work that I'm doing now, just to kind of give an example. Mm-hmm. But working as a rehab specialist, I'm working with an organization that works with foster youth. So it's my job to teach interventions that these residents can have for coping skills, learning how to cope with stress, learning how to manage their high levels of emotion. So these coping skills, again, whether you're an athlete or not, can be utilized in our everyday life. So for an example, today I took one of our residents to go open up a checkings account, and being a 17-year-old kid doing this on his own, it was very nerve-wracking. You can see it in himself, fidgeting, the nervousness, the excitement, doing something like opening up a checkings account, is a big deal. Growing up, kind of getting into adulthood, and as we were sitting there, it's like get an idea, or just asking him how he's feeling, feeling excited, feeling nervous, heart is racing, in these emotions. Well, we can take the time to just take a deep breath and slow your heart rate down, kind of calm those nerves. And so again, in the capacity that I'm working in as a rehab specialist is teaching these interventions and coping skills to deal with these high levels of arousal, to enhance confidence and motivation. And we'll dive a little bit more into how we do so. But one way that I personally want to do that is using exercise and recreational activities, going out on hikes. Hiking is really hard, but once you get to the top of your endpoint, like you feel good about it, right? Mm-hmm. You're confident. So that's just like a little, maybe like, I hope that gives a good example of just kind of some of the work that I'm doing.
I think that's a perfect segue, man, because, number one, like, I think that's really cool what you're doing, working with the kids and helping them in that way. And you said a lot of things with what you were saying. Since you're a trained specialist, you're able to see and talk about what you saw in his body language. You're able to see and talk about, how to interpret what you saw in him as you took him there. Right. And that's what's cool about you in your profession. Maybe a lot of us see it, but don't recognize it or know what to do with it or know what it means like you do. Right. So that's how you could serve as a huge benefit to, be a coach for athletes or other people that I see value in. Right. But it's a perfect segue in that you started discussing how you like to utilize movement to address a lot of these issues. You like to address exercise and things like that. And that's how you and I hit it off. Right. Because I was basically saying, hey man, that I am so with you. Right. And we could talk about some evidence and some research about movement and mental health kind of being one, right? Like together. But what I was saying is like, hey, Juan, like, let me help you out to move better, right? We can do these activities to help people to conquer, their physical literacy, to conquer their ability to move better, prevent injuries, kind of be their best, right? Be the best version of themselves. And I feel like all of that tied in perfectly to like what you're doing, because now you're able to, getting them moving, just getting muscles and blood flow and things moving. Like I know you could talk about here in a little bit, but having some direction as far as like biomechanics, neurodevelopmental patterns, and like making it useful at the same time. Right.
Yeah. Just to dive a little bit more into like really utilizing physical activity to enhance mental well-being, when I work with clients, I really want clients to understand that our behaviors can very much shift the way we feel and then impact the way we think, So for an example, the next time you go exercise, and people can kind of reflect back on how they feel after they finish exercising. You feel happy, you're in a good mood. Well, what is your thinking process now like throughout your day? Maybe it's a little bit more positive, maybe a little bit more confident. So not only does our behaviors impact the way we feel, but the way we think, the vice versa, our thoughts can also impact the way we feel and can impact our behaviors. So in doing so and knowing that, and really understanding this, like cognitive behavioral therapy, is that through physical activity, maybe you don't feel like you want to get up off the couch to go exercise, but you can force yourself to go do 5 jumping jacks, 10 jumping jacks, and just accelerate your heart rate. And doing so is going to then reframe and shift the way you feel about yourself. And it's going to reframe and impact your thoughts, so that's really why I like to utilize physical activity and exercise to enhance mental well-being, and that's just kind of why I love doing it with youth, and ultimately the population that I'm working with, because they have very sedentary, behaviors, don't leave the house, or, want to sit on a video game all day, or maybe don't have the resources to go do physical activity, but providing that, or these new services, different services to this population, is like, we can change our behaviors, we can change the way we think, we can change the way we feel through physical activity.
So I would say real quick, number one, for the viewers and listeners, if they're just hearing us and they don't know us talk about this, they know that we talk, most of our conversations that we've had through the years have mostly been geared towards youth, right? Mostly been geared towards kids. Yeah. And so I want you to talk about why that's more important, not maybe more important, but it's a special time and a special population to work with, because we could take advantage in so many ways to help a lot of people. So, can you talk about why we always focus on kids so much?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about it as well. But for me, it's the next generation, it's like, we want to have a healthy and happy society. Like, I specifically wanted to come back to the Central Valley, Fresno, California, to give back to the community and the society here. I grew up in this really small town, Fireball, California, and I had those mentors, and I was, I had the privilege to go play sports, very fortunate for that. But there are a lot of people that don't have those resources or opportunities. So being able to give back in the Central Valley is ultimately what I wanted to do. But again, for me, it's just like, it's the next generation. I want them to be physically healthy. I want them to be tough and resilient. I want them to hold themselves accountable, be emotionally healthy and mentally healthy, really. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's what I would say about it, is like something that caught my attention when you were speaking earlier was you used the word neurocognitive, right? Is that neurocognitive training?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that right there, man, that ties into why I love kids, from my field and my perspective and my stumbling upon this, through just learning. Right. And it's that neural part, right? And that neural part is something we can't see. Honestly, it's something that we can't even like measure in a lot of ways. Right. So what we do know, though, is what's super intriguing to me. And what we do know is that children physically, I'll start with physical and I'll move really quickly to mental. Physically, we have developmental windows. We have these periods of our lives where we can learn things the best, right? And it's everything from speed to power, mobility, stability, and the hard part, right? It all sounds great, but the hard part is that it's different for every person. So you can't just go to a 3rd grade class and say, "Oh, this is for 3rd graders. Yeah. I'm gonna do these specific activities and all that." It's different, right? There's not just a chronological age. Like the 3rd graders are, I don't know how old are 3rd graders usually, like 10, right? 9 or 10. You can't just say, "Oh, this is good for 9 and 10-year-olds," right? Because there's also a biological age where you have some kids that, they're the tallest kids in class. They're the lankiest and they're probably the slowest. And then you have these other kids that are like maybe they're on the shorter end or the medium end, and they're a little more filled out and they have a little bit more coordination than the others. And so the crappy part is that the coach is always going to, pick at all levels leading up to high school, even through high school, they're always going to pick the ones that, have a little more coordination and stuff like that. And that's okay. Right. But they're also the ones that always get the most coaching. They're also the ones that always get the most playing time and the most attention. Right. And I feel like all of that ties into exactly what we're talking about here, the mental health. How would somebody feel if they don't have the resources, like you said, that, your community you went back to doesn't have, right? I bet there's some extreme talent out there, but, they're not getting the attention that maybe the next town over is getting, or they're not getting the attention that the next kid's getting in their small town, right? Where if they just happen to be born at a, different environment and raised in a different environment and just had somebody like us to see their potential, then that could totally change their lives. Right. And then the thing that really sells me on kids is that these windows that I talked about that you could take advantage of, right? That's already enough. But if it wasn't enough for you, you only have one chance to do this, right? And once you do it, our brain is doing what's called neural pruning, right? And it's snipping away synapses at an alarming rate, especially the first year of life. And again, during our teenage years, it's called peak height velocity. And during this time, it's like Edward Scissorhands in there's going crazy, just chopping stuff away, right? And what's happening is it doesn't just chop away. It doesn't just prune away synapses in the brain randomly, right? It prunes away the ones that aren't being used. So if you have a coach, or, you're mentally not encouraged, or, any of these things are not happening for you at the right time, they're going to get pruned away. And there's not going to be ever a chance for you to maximize that potential ever. Once it's pruned, it's gone. That's it. Once you develop, you're done. And so when you're an adult, of course you can learn a new language. Of course you can learn a new movement, but it's going to take a long time and a lot of effort to get a baseball player who's been playing baseball only their whole lives to kick a soccer ball, right? It's going to look awkward as heck, right? Or vice versa, a soccer player to throw a baseball, it's going to look really weird. And the same thing with language. I love the example of language, right? It's like we can learn another language, but it's very difficult to do. So we have these pathways set and we only have one chance to do it right. So this is, a call out to all parents out there. Yes, I hope your eyes are open right now. I hope that you understand that this is a threat to our future generations, like you were discussing, right? And I hope parents understand that there's only one chance to do it right. And the majority of our kids, as you were mentioning, are becoming more sedentary. And that's happening worldwide. And it's definitely happening in the United States. And it's harming our children in the long term. It's not funny, right? It's not like a funny, cute thing that, oh, they're just playing video games all day. They're just being kids. No, like that's not okay. It's not funny. It's a serious thing, right? And we're starting to see it happen I'm starting to see it in my collegiate athletes. Not starting. We've been seeing this in my collegiate athletes. They're professional athletes. It's like, hello, it's not a coincidence for it to pop up on ESPN every other day that, there's an ACL tear, there's a hamstring tear. Oh, the NBA players are complaining because they're playing too many games. And we've been playing 82 games in the NBA season for ever, right? It's like, it's not a coincidence that the generations that we've seen PE go down, and mental health rising at the same time. And at the same time, we're seeing all these things carry over in our collegiate and our adult athletes, right? So that's my long spiel on why I love kids. And I definitely know that if you don't have your mental health in check, you're not going to want to move. You're not going to have the motivation. You're not going to want to do that. And so the next thing I want you to touch on for us, I know a lot of people are, number one, a lot of coaches are watching and athletes are watching. So they're always, interested in performance, and that's okay. That's not a bad thing. You should not feel bad about that. I want you to go win, right? I want you to lift the heaviest weight. I want you to do all that crazy stuff, right? But they're going to want to know, why would somebody want to focus more on their mental health, or, hire you or have you work with them one-on-one to improve their performance? Why would they want to do that? Why would they immediately need to change what they're doing and put that in their programming?
Yeah. Well, would you not have a physical therapist on hand on a team? Like physical therapists are there to prevent injuries and provide services when an athlete is injured, right? Well, a mental performance coach or a sports psychologist is there to not just enhance performance, but be proactive about it, right? So I just want to not backtrack, but maybe just give an example.
Mm-hmm.
Tension, because of stress or anxiety, tension gets built up in your body, right? And if you don't think so, maybe try to debrief at the end of the day. Take a deep breath and notice, like, my shoulders are up here right now because I'm fired up. I can very much just relax my shoulders a little bit. Like I had tension in my body because I was talking 100 miles an hour, or, I'm, thinking of like what's coming next. But people tend to walk around with a lot of tension in the body, whether it's because they're thinking of what's ahead, or if you're an athlete, maybe you're thinking about wanting to be a starting guy on your team, or you're thinking about homework assignments that bring anxiety and stress, right? That are all, you might have a due date for. So tension in the body, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but can lead to injuries, right? So
yes,
mental stress can lead to injuries, right? And you may not see it again, but the reason why a team should have these mental performance coaches or sports psychologists is to be preventable on things that can be preventable, for whether it's injury, and then, right, not just injuries, but there are a lot of athletes that are committing suicide, and having suicidal ideations, and that's even just hard to talk about, and athletes don't want to talk about the things that they're going through, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard to, it's hard for me just to say suicidal ideation, and it is for a lot of people. For somebody to go speak to someone, whether it be a coach or a friend or a parent, and say that they're having suicidal ideations, it's hard to do. But being able to build rapport with a counselor, a sports psychologist, a clinical psychologist, you have those resources in place for these athletes. And again, I'll go back to just the focus on enhancing the overall well-being of the individual, not just getting bigger, faster, and stronger. And I agree with you. We want people to win. We want guys to set school records, or move on and go play professional sports in whatever sport that they're playing in, or win championships. But for me, again, it's I very much care about the whole individual, their physical, mental, and emotional well-being. So
yeah. I mean, they're not going to be able to put forth their best effort if they're not, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the reason why I would say how athletes and coaches can very much benefit from having a sports psychologist or a mental performance coach on staff. You're ultimately driving your athlete to perform to the best of their ability, and not aspects of what this athlete is capable of doing. It's not just the physical part, but they can very much mentally push themselves a little bit harder, or be a little bit smarter, more efficient with decisions that they make, whether it be a pass or when to execute a shot, or a free throw, or when to pull the trigger on a 3-point shot, whatever sport it is that you may be playing. Being effective, being efficient is ultimately enhancing performance, and
got it.
And I think it starts with our brains. Our brains are the driver of who we are and what we do.
Yeah, I would say that, man, being a professional athlete, if we're talking about athletes right now, which I mentioned to you, coaches and athletes, a lot of them are going to be watching this from around the world. And I think if you're watching this and you're wanting to be a professional athlete, of course you have to be good at your skill, your craft, right? But there's a lot of pressure in that. Oh. And, we've seen so many movies, right? Where, people choke under pressure, and not even movies, real life, right? We see it all the time. Mm-hmm. And being a professional means that if you're playing an outdoor sport, if you're playing golf, yeah, you can hit, you can drive a good ball, you're pretty good, but can you be good during a rainy, windy day? Can you be good if your girlfriend just broke up with you, or you're having marital problems, the night before? Can you still put out that same performance? Because I'll tell you what, the media and everybody else, your sponsors, everybody's going to be relying on you because they're paying you to do this now. So being a professional is so much more than just the game. And if you're not having a coach like you, right? If I don't have a mental health coach on my team and I'm not even entertaining that idea, and all I'm working on is my physicals, you're not going to make it in the pros. So you got to start already. My advice to you, to everybody aspiring to become a professional, is to start working on that side as well, because you're going to need it. And there's going to be lots of eyes on you and doubters and things like that. And maybe you're already good at some of those things, addressing some of those things. But like I said, you're going to go through tough things in life, right? And you still have to put out a good performance. Everyone's expecting that. They're paying you to do so, right? Collegiate athletes, the ones that are on scholarships.
Yeah.
I mean, there's performance to perform. If you're not performing, you lose your scholarship. If you don't have good grades, you're going to lose your scholarship, right? I mean, so it's almost the same, right? As a pro, really. So, it kind of changes it if parents, if those are your goals for your kids, teaching them coping mechanisms, having them hit their developmental windows, not just physical windows. That's something I forgot to mention earlier, is that there's also cognitive windows too, right? So when I'm working with kids and training kids, I'm not just working on, agility, balance, motor control stuff with 10-year-olds, right? I'm also asking them questions, challenging their mental, right? How would you handle the situation, right? If you were in this, right? And a lot of them are, really get them thinking. I can see smoke coming out of their ears. And so, and then some of the older ones, right? Asking them deeper questions, stuff that maybe, I wouldn't ask a younger child. So, there's also cognitive developmental windows too, where we need to be having conversations with kids at the appropriate age times. And those are things that, specifics that we won't talk about here, but maybe in a future podcast we can talk about. But just to make it known, there are developmental windows for that as well. We, and everybody listening can probably attest to this. They know people that don't have as much emotional intelligence as others, right? And so, and sometimes you see little kids with off the charts emotional intelligence, right? So that's a whole nother biological age as well, right? So the other thing I would say to finish off my thought and then pass it back to you is, I would vouch for you or any mental health coach or specialist to come in and work with me and my team or my patients or clients for sure. Right. We currently right now, at my job at the university, we have a sports psychologist and we utilize them a lot. Awesome. And they come in, and help out some of our teams. We've had meetings with our full team at one time. We've had people that we refer to individually. And a lot of times as the athletic trainer, we're the first, maybe first, second line of defense, right? Like you said, coaches and parents. But a lot of times in the collegiate setting, we have people come straight to us, right? Because we're there with them 24/7, almost 24/7, games, practices, everything. So they come to us a lot of times with unsport related thoughts or problems. And, we often refer them over. So that's a great resource to have, because sometimes I'm not as good as earlier, you were recognizing body language and what to do with it. Right. So, definitely need you. And there is a huge benefit for that for all the reasons we've been talking about so far. So tell us about you. You said you got your master's and you were a grad assistant working with some sports teams, right?
Yeah.
So what does a typical day look like for you there? Like what when you go in, like, are you lesson planning? Do you have people already on your radar that maybe got referred to you? Or do you have, a consistent thing you set up with coaches that you do, and
So
what were some of the good? Yeah, go for it.
So I'll talk a little bit about some of the work that I did working as a mental performance coach. I was on staff with the university's baseball team, and that really, being on staff with them and just having a different lens from being a coach to a mental performance coach is just so eye-opening, again, because it's like you see the behaviors that when someone's not feeling well, and someone's down, like someone's having a hard time, they just strike out, they're in a slump, and you can identify that. You can identify it in their body language. And majority of the time, guys will walk in after striking out and don't want to talk to anybody, but I had the privilege of being a resource to these athletes, these baseball players. After one of them struck out and came in and was down and out, and didn't realize how much their negative self-talk was impacting their performance. And so being that resource for these guys, like, man, I was out there damn near, excuse my language, at every single one of their practices, like at their games. I was there as much as I could be. And there's about 40 players on the roster. I would see anywhere from 10 to 12 of them weekly, and we'd set up one-on-one meetings. Those of them that really wanted to sit down and talk and work through some of the things that they're struggling with, whether it was their confidence or motivation, maybe setting out some goals and having a little bit of direction. And then there were another third of them that I would work with them out at practice. Maybe they didn't have the time because of the class schedule to take an hour out of their day to come and sit on campus, and have a consultation. So working with them at their practice and being there and being that service for them was very, beneficial. Another part of the work that I did, or in games. And then there was another third that we probably didn't meet once throughout the year, but we would have 5 to 10 minute conversations, and that, even having those 5 to 10 minute conversations, like, you can get some really good gold nuggets out of that, whether it's from what they're saying or what you're providing for them, and how they can resonate with that. And some guys don't need an hour. Some guys do. Some guys need 5 minutes, some guys need a quick chat. And I would also work in a group capacity, working with a team individually. At the beginning of the year, we really drove down on setting foundational values to align their behaviors to the goals that they wanted to accomplish. So, that's just like in a team setting, but also focusing individually, working with them one-on-one was very important. But that was like capacity that I worked with.
So like when you're working with someone who strikes out, and obviously you're saying you have conversations, some are 5 minutes, some are 30 or an hour, whatever, it's almost like you're doing an evaluation. Is that what you're doing? You're doing an evaluation and you're trying to take those gold nuggets. Is that what's happening?
Yeah. You're very much evaluating, starting from the moment they're walking out of the box, how are they walking with their head down, or are they, kind of just, you see it in their face, in their facial expressions, maybe they don't want to talk to any of their teammates. And it's very important to be emotionally intelligent, and understand when there's an athlete that doesn't want to talk to you. It's like, that's fine. You need your time. I'll give you your time, like, come find me when you're ready, or come find me if you need it. You don't ever want to kind of just put that pressure on somebody either. But it is an evaluation, and they don't have to say a word for you to evaluate how they're feeling. you can see when someone is angry,
Yeah.
you're not going to go sit next to somebody that, looks like they want to take your head off. Like, you can see that. You can see when someone is upset, and evaluating these nonverbal cues is the beginning of it, if you get the chance to talk to them.
So then, like, what's an example of a gold nugget that you maybe, well, I guess you already said some of them, right? You first of all, you just see it, right? But what are some gold nuggets maybe you hear, and then how do you treat that? Like, do you just do movement right then and there, or do you do some sort of like self-talk exercise? Like, what are some examples of ways you treat it?
Yeah, again, you touched a little bit on how everyone is different, right? And everyone's needs and wants are different. There is not one program that is tailored to everybody. So getting an idea of what they're saying and how they're saying it. Maybe, for an example, I had a pitcher come off the mound after a really bad outing, maybe came out in like the second inning, was just, distraught. Like, asked him if he needed some time. He did. He called me over when he was ready. And just hearing how upset he was with his outing because his family was watching over Zoom, they were watching his outing, and his parents live in Japan, and, the time difference is, whatever it was at the time. But knowing that, it was more than baseball, it was like more than performing well. That most certainly had a deal in it, but it was like his parents got him there. He had his parents in mind while performing. So in knowing what his focus was, then priming him for his next outing and understanding that, like, your focus wasn't on yourself and your body mechanics. It was focused on these external factors. It didn't allow you to focus and lock in and get in a flow state, so just giving, like, reciprocating that information to him, primed him for his next outing.
Got it.
I'm sorry about that, Brutus.
Don't worry about it. Yeah.
Give me a second. Let me mute this.
Give him a bone already, man. Okay. So, that story reminds me of this movie I saw recently. It's called Hustle on Netflix with Adam Sandler.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And I don't want to spoil it for you, but I'll just say the small part. So he's struggling before draft day. Adam Sandler's prepping this NBA player, and he's struggling before draft day. And he's wondering, like, man, why is he struggling? And he's just Adam Sandler's just a basketball coach. So he goes to his wife at home, and he's like, I don't know what's up. He doesn't seem like he's in the right headspace, like, and most people can, like you said, like, tell body language and stuff. And so Queen Latifah is his wife, and she goes, well, he mentioned that his mom and daughter are back in Spain, and he's never been away from his daughter before. So maybe that's what it is. He's like, oh, good idea. So they get his mom and daughter to, like, come over without telling him. And they show up at his hotel room, and he's like overjoyed. Right. And then he performs really well on draft day. But that's, that reminds me of that story right there. Right. It's like, obviously maybe you couldn't fly the parents over the next day, but you found another way to verbally make him comfortable and prepare for his next at bat. Right. Yeah. So those are all, like, really good examples. So people can truly understand how they can benefit from this holistically, right? Not just with sport, but just with life in general. And the sooner we can do this, the better. And anybody aspiring to go to the next level of athletics, this is also something you're going to want to keep in mind. But is there anything else you had for us to share about?
No, I would kind of like to cap it off and give everyone a little tip that they can utilize, just kind of debrief their day. And I briefly did it, like just relaxing, tension in your shoulders, but just taking a deep breath in through your nose. And as you exhale, relaxing your shoulders a little bit. We hold on to a lot of tension in our face without even knowing it, so taking a deep breath in as you breathe out, like relax your eyebrows, relax your jaw, relax your eyelids, and ultimately getting into this resting mode allows your body to recover much faster. So yeah, I would say that's like a really 5 to 10 minute thing that you can do is take a few deep breaths to slow down your heart rate and just kind of get rid of tension that you might be holding on to, that you might not be aware of, so.
I think that's a big thing is, a lot of people aren't aware, right? It's important to have a coach in many aspects of life, but I think in this one, it's that a lot of people aren't aware of how they're holding themselves or how they look or what they're saying. And I know you've told me many times, like, Jeremy, you're speaking really fast. I could tell, you're in a heightened state right now. I'm like, oh, dang, okay, yeah. And even just speaking lower, makes my physical feel better. Even just speaking slower makes everything feel a little bit more relaxed. And one other thing I forgot to mention earlier when I said that I would vouch to have you on my team any day on my staff, right? Is that a lot of times people in my profession, if they see it's a tight tissue or an area that's causing poor biomechanics or an injury, whatever, right? Some stiffness, we often resort to the tools that we were taught, right? Oh, let's massage this thing out. Let's press really hard. Let's get in there, right? Let's foam roll. Let's do all that. But it's probably faster and more effective, especially because you're getting the mind involved, which controls everything, to do something like what you just did at the end right now, right? Yeah. Like what you just did at the end, I really relaxed my eyebrows. Like I even closed my eyes for a little bit. It's like, that did so much for me, more than a stretch, more than a physical movement or an intervention that maybe we would apply to a patient. So I think that's a missing area that we as clinicians in my field can definitely start to utilize and learn more about, to benefit our athletes and our people. But thank you for sharing that today. And I hope clinicians listening can start to utilize this for themselves, start to seek more help with coaches like yourself, and the athletes and coaches and parents listening. Hey, you only have one chance to do right. Don't mess it up. All right. So thank you, Juan, for being our special guest today. It was a pleasure. I learned a lot, and I hope everybody else really enjoyed this.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on, Jeremy. We'll have to do this again.
All right, man. Next time.
Perfect.